Hello my sweet friends and welcome to my channel. My name is Becky and I am so glad you're joining me today for episode 5 of my summer sewing series. We have made our way through each of these gorgeous handcrafted quilted accessories, and today we are going to be doing these gorgeous tote bags. I had intended to continue the series with an episode 6 Ruffled Boxy Bag and an episode 7 Bucket Hat, but I've changed my mind because I am just itching to stitch some cute clothes. So stay tuned because at the end of the video I will be sharing with you my next series is the Sundress Sew Along. But for now, we got a cute tote bag to make. So let's get this project started. You're going to need 2 pieces of your outer fabric, and before I quilted my fabric, I cut these pieces at 14.5 by 14.5, and I cut my batting at 15 by 15, and I have a video linked for you below that shows you exactly how I measure, mark, and then stitch in those quilting lines. And I always pre-quilt my fabric off camera just to save time in the video. Then once I have quilted and trimmed my pieces, I am left with a 14 by 14 quilted section of fabric here. Then we'll cut my lining fabric 14 by 14, and then I apply a medium weight fusible interfacing to the back of each of my lining pieces, cutting them a little shorter than the actual lining itself. We also have a pocket inside there, and you can choose to have your pocket be a coordinating fabric with the outer fabric, or you can have it the same as your lining fabric. It is totally up to you. And your pocket piece will be 14 inches long and 7 inches wide. And this is what our handle is going to look like, and you'll need 2 handles, and for that you're going to cut 2 pieces of fabric that are 30 inches long and 5 inches wide. And to give my handles stability and durability, I use warm and white cotton batting, but you can use whatever batting you prefer in your handle. And I cut that 30 inches long and 1 inch wide. And measurements for each of these pieces will be in the description box below. We're going to start with a piece for our pocket. Fold that in half and just lightly finger press the fold. And then at the bottom, mark a section. And we want to leave just a few inches open for turning. Then you are going to pin or clip your outside edges here. And once you have everything pinned or clipped, we're going to stitch a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And I am beginning at one of my bottom marks, and I'm going to backstitch here to secure those stitches, pivot at my corner, and then stitch down to the fold and back tack there as well. And that looks really good right there. And then you'll do that same thing to the other side of your pocket. And then take a second to trim all of your threads. And then we're going to press. And you want to focus on your seams and leave that fold a little soft. We're not going to press that crease out just yet. And then we're going to clip our corners close to our stitching. That's going to help this lie flat when we turn it right side out. And at the top where the fold is, we're going to do just a tiny little clip there as well. Then we're going to find our opening. We're going to turn this right side out. And I'm using my bone folder to really make a nice crisp corner there. It's sharp enough that it's going to make a nice corner without poking a hole in my fabric. And then I always run my finger along the seam, finger pressing that out. And then we're going to just kind of roll that seam to get it to where it's on the very edge of the fabric there. So it's just going to lie really nice and flat for us. And press. And we're going to come to the other side and roll and massage that seam to where it's nice and flat. And press. And really crease that fold at the top. Where that crease is, that's actually the top of our pocket. And then we're going to come down to our opening and make sure all of that is going to lie nice and flat as well. And press that down. And I like to put my logo on the inside on my pocket, folding my logo tag in half and marking the middle. Fold my pocket in half and give a little mark on the middle there too. And remove the backer from my logo. This little ruler is 1.5 inches wide. So I'm just going to lay that along the top edge of my pocket. Line that up there. I'm going to iron that on. And after that adhesive for my label dries, we're going to take this over to the machine and we're going to do some top stitching on our pocket. First, I'm going to take a second here to just stitch around my logo. And that looks great. And now we are going to top stitch very close to the edge here, about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. And I don't back stitch there, I just stitch from one end to the other. Now we're going to come down 1 inch from the top edge of our pocket and sew another line of stitching there as well. Again, I'm not going to back stitch, I'm simply going to sew from side to side. That just gives some nice detailing on our little pocket here. Trim off all your excess threads and press. And now you're going to bring in one of your lining pieces. And once again, we are going to fold our pocket in half and mark the middle. Fold your lining in half and you're going to mark the middle there as well. I'm going to come down 4 inches from the top, make another mark in the middle because that's where we're going to be placing our pocket. Now we're going to place our pocket on that mark. And then I always measure again just to make sure it is truly in the middle. And this time you will need pins. And I like to use my long quilting pins. I don't want it to move on me while I am sewing. So I'm just going to pin it all the way around. And now we are going to stitch on these 3 sides here. And that is going to attach our pocket to the lining. And it's also going to close that bottom here where we turned our pocket. And again, we're going to be stitching very close to the edge here. And I'm going to start about 1/4 inch down from the top edge, back stitch to the top, come down, back stitch again, and come down and continue around. We want to make sure that the corners of our pockets are securely stitched onto our lining. I'm going to back stitch to the edge, come forward a couple of stitches, back stitch to the edge again, and come forward. And we're going to stitch just as we normally would all the way around our pocket. And now that we're back around to the other corner of our pocket, we're going to stitch to the very edge, back stitch, come up to the edge again and back stitch once again, making sure that the corner is stitched very securely on our pocket. going to clip off those excess threads, and we're going to press our pocket. And we're also going to press up here to eliminate the crease and also remove our marking from our heat erasable pen. And our pocket looks fantastic. Look how nice and crisp that is. Now we're going to bring in our other lining piece, lay it face down with right sides together. I want the bottom of my tote bag to be smooth, so we're actually going to leave a space open on the side for turning. Clip or pin around the outside edges, leaving your top open. I want my lining to be slightly smaller than my outer fabric so it doesn't bunch up inside my tote bag. We're going to be stitching that 3/8 of an inch, 1 inch down from the top, and 2 inches down from the top is where I drew my mark for my 5/8 inch. So we're going to begin sewing 3/8, grade out to 5/8, and we're going to stitch that all the way down and around until we come to our opening over here on the side. And then we're going to come up from this other mark and continue stitching 5/8 of an inch, come back out to 3/8 of an inch, and up to finish off our stitching. So I have my seam gauge set here at 5/8, and again we're starting at 3/8, and we're going to work our way out to a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Reverse and then come forward. We're just going to follow that line that we drew. And now we're at 5/8 inch, and we're just going to keep sewing as we normally would. Pivot at each corner, then stop at our mark here. And back tacking here at our first opening, we're now going to start again at our next opening. Come forward a few stitches and reverse to secure those stitches in place. And come forward again. When we reach this dot right here, we're going to start coming down to a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And we're going to stitch on that line. And reverse and come forward again to finish off our stitches. So then after trimming off your excess threads and ironing your lining, we're going to go ahead and bring in our outer fabric pieces, pinning or clipping them together. And if you have directional fabric like I do, make sure that you have what is supposed to be the top left as your open edge. And we'll be stitching a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way around our outer fabric pieces. Using a seam guide is very helpful, especially if you're a beginner, but once you get used to seeing what each of those seam allowances actually look like, you may not even need a seam guide in the future. But I do like to demonstrate using one so you can see how convenient they are. Coming forward for a few stitches while holding our threads. Back stitching to secure those threads, and then coming forward and sewing as you normally would. And when you are sewing on your batting, occasionally you will have your presser foot catch onto that batting. So I just keep a pair of tweezers close by so I can just grab that batting, get it off of my presser foot, and then I can keep sewing. And you're going to sew all the way around, pivoting at both of your corners and ending at the other side with some back tacking as well. And now we're going to be doing some boxed corners on our outer fabric as well as the lining. And if you watched episode 4, then you know how to do that. But this one is going to be just a little bit bigger than what we did on our book sleeves. So we're going to come down to our bottom corner, spread out the corner to form a triangle, feel and match up those seams, and then we're just going to give a little press to the corner. making sure that your seams are open on both sides. We've got this nice little V here, and right here where the actual seam is where we're going to begin our measuring. And this little ruler here is exactly 1 inch wide. And I'm placing it right at the seam there, making sure that it's straight on the corner. And I'm going to draw a line there. Just like that. And you're going to do the same thing on the other corner of your outer fabric, and you're also going to do that on the corners of your lining as well. And with all of our corners marked, we're going to go to the machine and we're actually going to be stitching right across those lines on each of our corners here. And that looks great. You want to make sure your seams remained opened on both sides, and then you're just going to stitch all of your remaining corners the same way. After clipping off your excess threads, you're then going to trim off those corners, and you're going to do it close to, but not going through the stitching just like that. So then just take a second and trim off the rest of your corners. Then you are going to press open your seams. And now we're going to set those aside and work on our other handle. First, you're going to take your fabric, fold it in half, press a crease all the way down your fabric. And then you're going to open it up and take one side almost all the way to the crease. You want to leave just a little bit of space between that edge and your crease, and you're going to press this side into a crease. You're going to do that all the way down this side of the fabric, and then you'll come to the other side and fold that in and crease that edge all the way down as well. And then we're going to fold both edges on top of each other just like that, and press that down again along that same crease line. And this is the side that I want to be my outside of my strap. So I'm going to open this up like that, and right along that side is where I'm going to nestle in my warm and white interfacing. And I'm going to work that to where it's lying flat, and then fold this back over on itself. And you want to make sure that those edges are lying one on top of the other, and then you're going to pin or clip into place all the way down your strap. And just as I am showing you here, I've stitched very close to the edge here. And we're going to take this to the machine and do the same thing. And we're going to start on our open edge first. And we're not going to need to backstitch because this area is going to be caught up in the seam allowance when we sew it onto the top of our tote bag. And again, we're stitching very close to the edge here, about 1/8 of an inch away. And as you're stitching, you want to make sure that those edges stay lined up one on top of the other, so you catch both edges at the same time in your stitches. And now that we have reached the end, you are going to pivot and stitch across your strap to the other side. And pivot again and sew up the opposite edge all the way to the end. And I'm not stretching, I'm simply supporting the fabric in the front and in the back with my hands. To clip my threads. And I'm also going to trim off the excess warm and white interfacing that I have down here. And these straps just look so nice and neat, just so pretty. Take both of your straps and make sure that they are the same length. Sometimes, even though you've cut them to the same length, they don't always end up being the same length when you stitch them. And that looks pretty good. And now let's take our outer fabric and turn it right side out and press out those corners. And then take your outer fabric and tuck it into your lining. And then you want to match up your seams. Pin or clip that to one side of the seam. Come over to the other side and match those seams. And pin that to one side. And 3 inches from that seam, I'm going to make a dot, because that's where we're going to put our straps. Go ahead and mark your seams on both sides 3 inches in. And you're going to take one of your straps and make sure that there's no twist in there. And you're going to tuck it in between your lining and your outer fabric. And you're going to take that strap, lay that just like that. And I am going to use a long quilting pin to make sure it doesn't move. And I put that strap with about 3/8 of an inch of that fabric extending over the top edge of my lining. And you're going to go ahead and pin in, again remembering that that strap goes right up against that side of your mark. So it's going toward the middle of your bag, and you want to leave about 3/8 of an inch extending above the edge of your fabric. And so now with your straps pinned into place on both sides, you're then going to match up all of your edges and pin or clip those into place as well. And with all of your edges pinned or clipped into place, we're going back to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around our tote bag. And I have removed this portion of the platform from my sewing machine because that is going to allow me to place my project right over this more slender arm here so we can stitch in a complete circle. I'm going to start on what's going to be the back. Hold our threads and come forward a few stitches. Back tack to secure those stitches and come forward. And we're just going to sew slowly over our handle. And we're coming back around to where we started right here. Stitch a little past where I started. Back stitch to secure the stitches and come forward to complete our seam. Clip off all of those threads, and we're going to lint roll to pick up any excess threads and find your opening, and we're going to very carefully turn everything right side out. I love this fabric. Oh, it is so cute. Make sure that our seam is going toward our lining, and we're going to press along that seam. And then you'll do that same thing on the other side. You're going to come to your opening, line up those edges, and then once you've got them nice and flat, you're going to press that. And we're just going to go stitch that closed, just like we stitched that open side closed on our straps. And I'm going to begin my stitches about a 1/4 inch above where my opening begins, and also finish about a 1/4 inch below where my opening ends, back stitching to make sure I secure those threads at each end. And again, we're going to be stitching a very small 1/8 of an inch seam all the way down to close up our opening. As you sew, make sure you're keeping those edges one on top of the other so you catch each side as you are sewing. And we're going to clip these threads as well, and then you're going to press out that seam. And we're going to roll to pick up any excess threads. Oh, that is adorable. I just love it. And then we're going to tuck our lining down into our tote bag and really work those corners so they lie nice and flat. And then you want to work your lining so you've got just a little bit of your outer fabric showing. That way we're going to tuck that lining so it's not going to show on the outside when we stitch this all down. And once that is lying nice and flat, give that a press. And we've got this side wanting to roll out, so you're going to do the same thing on the other side and work the lining flat and press that. And now we're headed to the machine and we're going to top stitch close to the edge here, and then we're going to also do another line of stitching 1 inch down, and that's going to do several things. It's going to hold our lining to the inside, and it's also going to reinforce those straps there as well. And I'm going to start at the back, and I am using the inside edge of my presser foot as a guide to stitch the first line of stitching, and then I have set my seam guide over here to the inch mark for that second line of stitching. And again, we're going to hold our threads for just a few stitches, back stitch, and then come forward. And we're going to stitch all the way around, checking to make sure that our lining is still tucked down from that top edge, and stitching slowly over the seams. And you'll stitch slowly over your straps as well. And again, I am not stretching the fabric, I'm just supporting it from the front and from the back with my hands. And as we are coming back around where we started, we're going to stitch slightly past that, back stitch, and then come forward to complete our stitching. And I'm starting at that same back edge again, and hold threads for just a couple of stitches, back stitch, and come forward to secure those stitches. And as you continue stitching, you want to check to make sure that your lining is staying nice and flat between that top row and your 1 inch line so it doesn't bunch up. We are coming back to where we started. I'm going to stitch a little past it, back stitch, and come forward to complete our stitching. And that looks fantastic. So we're going to do one more thread clip. And we are finished. Look how cute this is. They just turn out so adorable. We've got a little pocket in there. And I love these. I don't know, I may have to keep this one for myself. That fabric is just too cute. and they're perfect size. You can do thrifting, you can go to the farmer's market, just a nice little weekender bag. Absolutely adorable and a very practical gift as well. And if you want to sell them, they actually were a good seller for me too. I just love how these turn out. Thank you so much for joining me for today's tote bag tutorial. It has been my pleasure to sew with you. I have left my tote bag without any type of closure at the top, but you can use what you have learned in episode 1 or 2 to add a zipper to the top. Or you could also use episode 4 if you want to add a tie closure or a snap tab. Anything like that would actually be really cute to close up your tote bag. And you know what else is cute with a tote bag? A cute little sundress. And I have picked out 5 easy to sew sundresses for my next series, the Sundress Sew Along. And first in that series, we are going to be sewing McCall's 7405. You can purchase these patterns in store at Hobby Lobby. They usually have them for $2.99, and you can also buy them at simplicity.com and other places online, but I always check to make sure wherever I plan to purchase them, I'm getting the best price available. I have enjoyed doing these quilted handmade accessories with you, and I hope you plan to join me for the Sundress Sew Along as well. And until next time, my sweet friends, be blessed.